Okay, we're on tape. Tapes are rolling. So let me just repeat that. So while my syllabus says that the class is available as a pass, no pass option, that possibly was my mistake. The official course catalog for the college says that it's not available. It's available for grading only. I will look into that, but and if that's the case, I will change my syllabus. But I'm just letting you know that. Right now, if you woke up this morning and panicked and said, I want to switch to pass, no pass, you're not able to do that in the registration system for this class. So I'm not sure why that is, so I'll look into it and let you know. Okay? But if you're, let me repeat it again, if you're worried about your grade enough to drop this class, don't do that. It doesn't make sense. Anyway, any other questions before we get started?
So I sent an email to kind of answer questions on project 1.
Okay.
I still have not even been successful in getting a grid though. Just like
okay, we could take a look at your example if you want. Other project 1 questions? And other questions outside of project 1, let's say. Everybody have a good weekend?
yeah. It's like I do this.
Spent all weekend doing JavaScript. So today, here's our class page. All right, today it's September 4th, and we're going to be looking primarily at the concept of more into variables and data types. We'll do some examples and maybe look a little bit more at events and functions, which we started to look at a little bit in some of our earlier projects. And we're going to start on project 2 today, which is an assignment that's not due until the second half of September. Okay? So, and it's outlined here. We'll go through that. Project 1 is due on Thursday, and there's some questions about that, so I'll get to that. Quiz 1 opens tomorrow and is open through next Monday at midnight. Okay? Simple 5 questions. Everything on the test we've covered. It's on the website. Question from the audience. Are we going to be using the Twitter Bootstrap for other stuff? We might. That's a good question. It's not really a necessity for this class. And we might use it going forward. But it's not going to be something that's required for every project. And while it's integrated into the Project 1 demonstration that I did, it really isn't required for Project 1, Twitter Bootstrap, and it's not even part of Project 2. So it isn't required, really. But it is, if you have a chance to work with it, Project 1, you get a sense of how it creates those grids. It's a pretty cool technology to become aware of. So I hope that answers your question. Question about Project 1. So is your project posted online?
I text you.
You're Jerry?
Doug.
Doug, okay. So you are right here.
Yeah.
I can debug your project in front of the class. That's cool.
Yeah,
So, yeah.
I put some debug in there.
So this is a grid. This is a grid. It just has one column, right? Was that your intent? No.
No, I put some debug in there and then tried to figure out what it was doing.
All right, well, let's see what's going on. So first thing is, do we get any JavaScript errors when we load this thing? And we got a spelling error right there. Spelling counts for things like keywords in JavaScript, like function names. So get element by ID, the E is capitalized. And that's probably the first issue. We could try to get around that. Are you working on that site now?
I got it up.
Yeah, if you want to fix that, I could and upload that. So to get to your JavaScript program, if you look at, it's going to be on line 4, right? Get element by ID has a lowercase e. And I don't think there's a way that I can override that easily in the debugger.
Where we get to the steps through the source code easier than stepping through the whole entire page. Really, now you can't step through it if you get to it incorrectly, right?
Yes.
So how do you get to it quickly or quicker than having to go through the whole page? Or can you do that through
I'm not sure what you mean by having to go through the whole. So I'm not sure what the question is. So I won't repeat it to you. So what do you mean by having to go
right
through?
now you're at the top of the page. And you're able to
Well, I'm not necessarily at the top of the page. I loaded this page, and when I look in the console when I loaded it, I realized that there's a JavaScript error. It doesn't mean I'm at the top of the page. And then when I look at the resources that are required for this page, one of the, there might be better ways, but if I want to look at the JavaScript, I could just see it. I can look at all the resources that the page loaded, and that JavaScript will be in, and I could just click on it.
And then can you step through it from here?
You can. Yeah, so the question is, many programming debuggers have the concept of line-by-line step debugging. And JavaScript's console has some of that capability. And let's see if I can.
So like you're actually just spelling so get the same output.
All right, so let's. Yeah, line 4 still has that. You uploaded it?
Oh no, I didn't upload it. Then I gotta go into
Yeah, I mean, if you could, I can't see it unless you upload it. Yeah, that's all right. So, but to answer your question.
Yeah, let me sort of follow up on his question. If you're having your code in something like BB Edit, will that sort of show you the errors in the code, or is it?
Probably not. I'm not that familiar with BB Edit. So that's a separate question. There are code editing tools that have code hinting that is smart enough sometimes to tell you when you have a syntax error in your code. Right? Dreamweaver has that for some languages like JavaScript. Then, when your program is running, there are debuggers that allow you to inspect the internals of the program as it's running, the program execution. Right? And most compilers have debugging tools that allow you to look into the code and inspect elements and states as the code is processing. This tool does have that capability. Now, JavaScript's not a compiled language, so it's interpreted in the browser. So it's not 100% up there with debugging tools, but it's better than nothing, right? and I could go through. It's probably best if we post sort of a tutorial on that. And to some degree, I can maybe go through that a little bit today. But there are breakpoints and things like that built into the console, I believe, in Google Chrome.
Right, I got to go when I hit on the source tab, but you got to get to that JavaScript.
Yeah, you got to get to it. So unlike other debuggers, there's no like command line run this, and it's not a compiled language, so you just don't get that. The browser is interpreting and running the code simultaneously, and you have to depend on the browser and its capabilities. In this case, this JavaScript console to be able to manipulate those capabilities. And these debuggers or consoles or whatever you call them, code inspectors, are improving all the time, both on WebKit and all the browsers. So it's something that is a really important thing to know in this class, but unfortunately we can't spend the whole class going through all the tools.
Before we uploaded it.
Cool. Yeah, looks the same.
Okay.
Now you got no E. So there was a hand raised up here, Steve. I guess it really depends on whether you prefer. You guys are talking in class. Do we recommend Chrome development tools over Firebase? You know, to answer John's question, I think, you know, it's a matter of personal preference and what you're used to. I used to prefer Firebase because a year ago it was a little bit more functionally capable than Chrome. And I am now a little bit more used to Chrome, just because I've used it more in the last 6 months. So it really is personal preference. Developers seem to like Chrome because Chrome seems to be built a little bit more feature-wise for developers. So, but that's not an advertisement for a free product. And that's what Steve said. What do you want to be called? I have a question. You could call me Jay, first of all. You don't have to call me Professor or anything like that. I have a question about uploading. If I do not, so as I said, you could use a web server account on the student system, but you don't need to. To me, it matters absolutely. It doesn't matter at all. If you already have an account on your own domain, you could use that and just send me a link. If you want to use a student server, they're free, and just what you do is you go to our class webpage and you click right here. Right? So some of the stuff that in the beginning of the class was on top, I put lower because most of you have already done that. You've checked indicate, it shouldn't be at the top of the page anymore. But if you're still looking for a student account, you can just click there and they'll give you one. They send you an automated email. Okay, we got the E back. And I lost your, here you are. Get elements by class name.
What's wrong? Because I'm looking at my code here.
So somebody hacked your server. Let's see if we can fix it.
It says class name, right?
It says, here. It says get element by class. So what you changed now is 4, and that's now correct. On line 5, on line 5, it should say get elements, plural, because class name returns more than one single. It doesn't return a singleton. It returns a set of elements because there could be more than one element with the same class name. So the smart people at the W3C or wherever call it get elements by class name, and if you don't put that S in there, you'll get a bug. So, question home: what do you want to be called? I think I answered that one. Do I have to email you each time? No. At the beginning, email me once with your website address or a page that has a menu on it to all of your projects. And after that, I will go to that page. When the projects are due, find your project and grade it from there. So you don't really need to submit projects. You just need to do them and post them and make sure that I grade them. 3-step process. So do I have to email each time? Okay. I got an error due to expiration of security clearance. Expired. Yeah, so I don't know who this is, Cal. So expiration of security clearance. I'm not sure what that means. But I could look into it and maybe help you if you send me an email. So, Mr. Doug, get elements by class name. I guess get elements by class. So maybe it's elements by class name.
Well, there's 2 of them, yeah. There's one say get elements by class name. There's the rows and span.
You know, I would use, let me see. Why is it a get elements by? Yeah, I would use class.
But your instruction statement
It says get elements by class name. Get elements by class name is not defined. All right, let's see. Yeah, maybe the
No. Exactly what you typed in.
Yeah, I got the variable rows and variable span are get elements by class name.
Your elements.
Okay, well, let's go to my example and see.
Okay.
But it's created.
And this code is so right. So I'm getting them from the reference that I already got from within get element by ID, the grid. Right? Does that matter? It shouldn't.
Okay, sorry.
But you should have document. Or maybe you had grid in there. I mean,
Actually, I had by element, not element.
so let me see what you got. Where's that problem? Line 5?
Yeah, I just updated it. Line 5, get
Yeah.
elements by
So
class.
you need to qualify it with document, or like I did with grid. So you need to say what is the object that you're running that method get elements by class name on.
You didn't put grid.
So put grid dot and grid dot here
On both of them?
on both of them. Yep. He needs to proceed with the yep, we got that. Thank you, Noah. So and you got that right? Very good. Okay. Anybody else have a project one that needs a little help while we're doing this for doing? There were a few people, so I'll tell you, I made a big error, right? And a couple of people got caught in this. So the for statement is what type of statement? A loop, right? Or an iterative statement, right? And it's defined, remember, with these three sort of arguments passed within the conditional for the for loop, right? One, what is the starting point of the iteration? 2, how long do you iterate until when? You know, what is the condition that needs to be met for you to stop? And then what is the iteration? And they're all separated by semicolons. And in my example, I mistyped and put a comma there. And for those of you who didn't catch that and just copied and pasted the code from the page, a few of you sent me a note, why isn't this working? So that is what, and I did reply, that's why it's not working. That needs to be a semicolon. So I will fix that when I get home tonight, but I'll just let you know that now. Oh, yeah, you're right. Oh, so then what happened is somebody took this out in their example because they had a comma separating it. Oh, I see. So I did do it right. I'm sorry, I glanced at this and I thought I was right. You're right.
You really need to have that extra LEN in there. You can just say I is less than standard.
Yeah, you could do that. Right. But this shows that you could use that area of the statement to define and assign multiple variables.
Can you pull it up again?
You only get 4 chances. Okay, X is not defined.
19.
So let's see. So you're incrementing X, but you're using I as the incrementer. So you're lucky you got an error and not an infinite loop. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Okay.
So you're getting close, but this is very common. You know, this is good stuff, right? This shows you how to debug simple things like spelling or variable name mismatches, things like that. So we're not quite using breakpoints or things like, we're not using advanced areas of the debugging, but at least we're getting to see how we can help in problems like this. So, okay, while Doug is fixing that, let's go back here. So, talked about the project. We talked about the quiz. Talked about.
Is there a time limit for the quiz?
The quiz has no time limit.
Oh, and you can do it as many times?
You can do it as many times as you want. The first one is what counts. You can do it as many times as you want. Unless you tell me that, you know, I got a phone call and somebody, you know, I mean, you know what I mean? But it would be a futile quiz if you could take it as many times. You know what I mean? That would be sort of first time count. So, but there's no time limit. Well, there is a time limit. Wednesday at midnight. But you could start taking it now, or you could start taking it at midnight tonight, and you can leave it in your browser. As many of the teachers say, it's not a bad idea to put it on your screen, print it out, don't submit it, sit there and fill it out by paper and then submit it. That's up to you. You could do that. I'm sorry? There are 5 very simple questions. I guarantee you, they're not quite that simple, but I think you'll be surprised at how much you've learned so far. Let me put it that way. So, let's see. We're going to continue debugging Doug's project as soon as he gets that next update up there. Do you know?
I've updated it.
All right. Doesn't look like you got it working yet. Looks like an infinite loop. All right. No, maybe. What was that? Mr. Did you crash my browser? Yeah, I think this is an infinite loop. Still running here. Uh-oh.
Maybe not infinitely.
All right, I got to close this. Goodbye. So I don't think the I matched the I. Do you understand the and let's do this. Let's go to my page so everyone understands what we're talking about. So in a for loop, we go back to our loops and conditionals lesson, right? A for loop is a type of iteration, right? A type of doing something again and again, right? And the way it works is you have what's called an iterator, a number. And it's almost always going to be an integer, right? Integers are good for counting, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. Or in computer, 0, 1, 2, 3, right? And so we set an integer value. We define the condition in which the for loop is going to cease looping. And then we set the iteration level. If we say I is equal to I plus 2 here, where it says I plus plus, first of all, I plus plus is syntactically equivalent to what? I is equal to itself plus 1, right? So if I was to change that to say I is equal to itself plus 2, then we go through half as many loops, right? Does that make sense? It's how much are we incrementing each time, and because it's a counter, we're incrementing 1. That's probably the most intuitive right now, right? So if this actually, you're using a while loop. When I think about it.
Right.
You're using a do-while loop, and the difference between the difference between that is You have to explicitly increment it. There's no way to put the increment in that parentheses area. The incrementation has to happen as part of the code block. And this variable has to be equal to that variable. You have to increment the variable that the while condition is dependent on, or that condition will never be met. X will never be less than 10, and you'll get an infinite loop. The do will never stop. You know what I mean? Because the while will always be true. Does that make sense? That is a condition for an infinite loop. And what we were looking at in your code before is you had that condition, right? You're using I as the incrementer,
Right,
but you were upping it with the X.
right, okay, so I need that change.
Okay, let's cross our fingers here. This doesn't work, you're getting kicked off the studio. Well, it looks different.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that. We're making progress. Do we have a JavaScript error? Cannot read style properties. Let's see. You are, So, unfortunate, this is a great statement. You know, this is a great way to code, but you can't, well, let's see. Can you do this? Rows. So so you're looking at the rows array, Doug, up here. You see what I mean? In your code on line 24, but you're looping through spans, right? So I think that you have no visibility to that rows element right in there, right? There's no context. It knows what rows is. It doesn't know what rows II is.
Or faster or slower, because I use that to measure my people stats.
When you're going, okay, so let's see. While,
It's not what you want.
oh, here's what's happening. You're incrementing beyond the point. You have more rows than spans or something,
Yeah.
and you're asking for a span value a row value that doesn't exist,
Runs out.
right? This should match this, essentially.
Rows should match.
Or if you want to do it by rows, change that. It's up to you.
So it can be really instead of span style length?
If you want to.
If you want to loop through rows, yes. If you want to loop through rows, you got to put rows in it. Okay. So where was I? We're talking about this. So talked about infinite loops. We talked about this last week. We're going to move on this week to the value, to talk a little bit about the potential values of variables. So we talked about a variable, right? What is anyone know what a variable is? It's a piece of information. It's a piece of data or information. What makes it a variable? It has a name. Very good. It's a piece of data that has a name that we've given a name to. And to do so, we do two things typically. We define the variable, and we do that with a word called var. Typically, we say var space and give it the variable name. So we define the variable, and defining a variable is a separate act than assigning a value to the variable. Separate act, separate statement. However, you could do shorthand and put them in the same statement. You could say var x is equal to 2, semicolon. And then in one statement you've done an assign, a definition of a variable and the assignment of a value to that variable. That's just happens to be a shortcut, but in general, they're two separate things, two separate events, two separate commands that you have to do. Define a variable, and then assign it a value. You don't need to assign it a value, but what good is a variable without a value? Number one. Number two is, you don't really need to define it in JavaScript. As somebody asked on the forum, JavaScript is kind of one of these weird, loosely typed languages that not only lets you define a variable without giving it a specific data type, but also allows you to actually create a variable on the fly without really using that var keyword, although it's probably not a good idea to do so, just for your own sanity. Make sense? So, we talked about variables. What we're going to talk about today is a little bit about, while I said JavaScript allows you to define variables without typing them, and is somewhat lenient in how data types are used relative to other compile type languages, it still has the concept of a data type. It still knows the difference between a number and a string and a date and other types of data, right? So why would a programming language care about that stuff? Why not just deal with variables? What value do data types provide? Very good. Yeah, by defining the type of variable, you almost give it additional capabilities. If something is a number, it can be added. If something is a number like an integer, it can be incremented easily, right? If something is a string, it can have its own operations. You could find a substring within a string, let's say, or double the string, or something, repeat it, or whatever. So each type of data might have its own intrinsic operations, and by typing data, we help ourselves in making those operations available. Some compiled languages have what's called strong variable data typing. And JavaScript isn't like this, but what that provides you with is protection, programmer protection. So you don't assign a string to a number variable, right, let's say, or something like that. The reason compiled languages like features like that is because they typically work on much larger scope of programming. They're doing, typically applications written in C and Java are doing a lot more with information, and the programmer wants to have those protections built in. They don't want to get all the way to a finished product and the user find out that they're trying to put a number in and it's looking for, OCT instead of 10 for the month, right? So JavaScript, which grew up as sort of a web programming language for web pages where the scope of the whole program is really on one document, it grew up as more of a loosely typed language. It's not as stringent a requirement that somebody know what data type or variable is on a web page necessarily. There's pros and cons to that, obviously, but that's the way it is. So what we're going to look at, though, is the levels and how we can define data types within a variable, right? So before we dive into this, Doug, you ready for us? Something's not working. I could tell you what it is, maybe. Well, it doesn't look like you got a JavaScript problem. You have a bootstrap problem, and that's why your grids are not being created. But I don't think you have you're not getting a JavaScript error at this point.
Right.
So you had a few. We fixed those. Do you have these files up there, and they're not pointing in the right place, or?
They're all under project 1.
Bootstrap. They're in these locations.
Windows Bootstrap, in that folder inside a folder when you download it.
Yeah.
You take it out. When you download it, it's a double folder.
Yeah. So let me look at this.
Like Bootstrap.
So the two files that should be in there is the bootstrap.css and bootstrap.js, correct?
Right. Yeah, and they need to be.
I just moved those after the download. I just moved those from the download folder into
Yeah, but
the project one folder.
well, if they're not here, I could go to your. I can try to find it. That's before. Yeah, I can't look under that. So yeah, I could do this project one. Yeah, so it's not there.
I'm looking at the server right now, and I see 115 meg for the bootstrap.css.
And that's in a folder called Bootstrap under project one.
What's that?
That's in a folder called Bootstrap under project one.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's another thing. So let's see if I can. It might be that this is capitalized. No, that didn't help you.
So I did cap.
Yeah, that might be a problem also. You know, different operating. You're using Unix on the server, and you're using Windows on your computer, and that might be using capitals and especially spaces in folder and file names is not a good idea. Although that doesn't seem to be a problem.
Right, because I just copied and pasted.
So this is the server.
Yeah.
And that's under.
Here's
Oh,
my
so it's
Windows.
not under Bootstrap though. You got to put it under Bootstrap. It's looking for it in a folder called Bootstrap. Does that make sense? If you look at your code, you're telling this page to find that file under Bootstrap/CSS.
So those two files need to be under the folder Bootstrap.
They need to be under. There needs to be a folder named Bootstrap, and under that there needs to be a folder named CSS, and a folder named JS, and those files need to be under those respectively. It's probably easier just to change the code in your page.
Right.
Does that make sense? Just take out those two folders before those file names. I think, from what I just looked at.
So I guess my question is, in the project folder, I guess, if that, I didn't see where that was explained in there.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go back to the project definition. And you're right. I download the Bootstrap library. So I didn't say specifically how to link them. You're right. You know, to some degree, I mean, this is pretty straightforward, but to some degree you have to, I mean, I did it the way it got downloaded when I downloaded Bootstrap. It might be different in Windows. I know that when Windows unarchives a zip file, it creates a redundant folder. In other words, if you have a zip file called bootstrap.zip, it'll create a bootstrap.zip folder and then put everything in there. And that might be what happened. So the point is, at the end of the day, your files that are in your page have to link to the right place.
Right.
And I can't control your server.
No,
I can just kind of help you.
Right.
All I can do is help you find it.
You did say in the lecture last week that if you just unzip the file and let it fall into the folder that you're doing the project on, that it should line up with those folders.
It should, and we did it. You know, we did it. I did it in front of you guys last week. So, but like I said, in Windows, sometimes it could create it. I might have gotten rid of that redundant folder without you guys seeing it. It might be. You know, I might have just done it really quickly and not called it to attention. So, but the point is, you know, this is not JavaScript. This is not even CSS. This is HTML basics. You know, your source and your links and all that has to point, obviously, to. Does everyone know the 3 ways you can refer to a URL locally?
By reference, you do it by reference.
You can do it, yeah. Well, by what are those 3 references? So you could do an absolute, you could do a root relative, and you could do a document relative. Right? So absolute has what? Has the full domain name, folders, and files. Right? A document relative, what is this? What kind of reference is this href? That's a document relative. And the reason we know that is because, well, that would make it a absolute. The reason it's a document relative is because it doesn't have it doesn't lead with a slash. If this first character were to be a slash, then it would be telling the page, the browser, that this link is relative to the domain of the website. Right? It would take, if we put a slash up here, it will go to student.santarosa.edu/bootstrap, which, as we know, probably doesn't exist. Unless one of you guys FTP'd it up there. Somehow. I don't know how you could have done that. But do you see what I mean? So a site relative link always has a slash in front of it. And that means it's relative to the whole site, the whole domain, and starts after the domain. So, but again, these are important. You got it up? Let me try it. It works. So we get to see Doug's project.
It just needs to be modified a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. Great. So this is great because look, I guess I can't go back. But Bootstrap making your grid, pretty simple, huh? I mean, you know what I mean? The code was there. Once the library is linked in, it's pretty straightforward to create a grid. Yeah, right. So now that you got it working, you could go through and figure out how the spans and those work. Great. So those are all very simple issues, but it's good that we got to go through this, right? Because everybody has simple issues, even me, right? We all make spelling errors, comments that have a semicolon or whatever.
So
It's not about not making errors, it's about finding them. And it's about finding them, you know, as quickly as possible, so you don't spend all the time getting frustrated and drop this course.
the Google tool, the JavaScript console, for that debugging feature, where did you go to the console?
So I am in Google now,
Right.
and so you want to be in, so here, let's go over here. I'm going to open this up, and the best way to open it is just inspect element. And by default, it'll open it up in this elements view and show you the document itself. If you click over to console, you're still getting errors, but if you click over to console and you reload it, it should flush out any errors that you have, right? Cannot call. So we didn't have this a minute ago.
Is it an element? An element.
It's grid get elements by class name. Now that's correct. It means that grid's not being returned or something. Document get element by ID grid.
You gotta say rows and rates and rows.
Yeah, if there's no rows, if there's no row. So it's not, I don't know if that's causing error, but yeah, it's
Yeah, it's my row show dash rate. Yeah. Right.
okay. Well, I'm going to move on. That's okay. You're welcome. So, where were we? Project, we were talking about data types. So, JavaScript, so we talked about data types, talked about variables. Variables in JavaScript have three, what I call primitive types. In other words, they're kind of built into the operating system. I mean, the programming language. And those are numbers, strings, and booleans. Anyone know what a boolean is? It's a true or false, right? It's something. It's a special variable with two values. And in JavaScript, the variable values that are allowed in Boolean are 0, 1, or true or false. Not the string, quote, true, unquote, but the value, TRUE, which is not a string, it's a value of a Boolean, true or false. So you could test for that. You could say, is X, X being a variable of type Boolean, equal to FALSE? And it will test that, the truth of that statement or not. Okay? So we have 3 primitive types. That means the language itself understands how to work with these types. To some degree, these types are a little different than other programming languages, so I'll bring that up now. Most programming languages differentiate between integers and decimal, numbers that allow decimals. JavaScript does not. A number is a number. There is no int, and there's no float, and there's no long float or double float or any of that. It's a number. And a number can be 5 or 100, or it could be 3.14, whatever. It is stored as a float, obviously. So many languages allow integers because they're simpler and easier and cheaper to store. And browsers don't care as much. Their trade-off is making it simpler to program rather than conserving memory, in the operating system primarily. Right? So it's just a trade-off to make it simpler to program. Plus, there's a lot more memory than there was when most programming languages were created. When C++ was created, it was 64K universe or whatever. So we have a number type, and then we have a string. Some languages have a character type also, a string of length 1 essentially. JavaScript does not. So we have numbers and we have strings. A string could be A, or it could be A, B, C, D, E, always defined within quotes. Single quotes and double quotes are sort of synonymous in JavaScript. You can use either to create a string literal, right? So there's another definition that we talked about the other day, a couple of weeks ago, that I'll bring up now that we're talking about variables. So a variable has a name and has a value, and one way to assign a variable a value is to pass it a literal. That value spelled out, in text. So a literal is literally the quote A, B, C, D, E, unquote. And when you assign that to the variable, that becomes the value of that variable. Does that make sense? So I don't think there's a question about literals on the quiz, but one day somebody will ask you, that you could say, I took a programming class at the JC, and somebody will say, do you know what a literal is? And now you know what it is. It's just the explicit value spelled out in the code. So we have variables, we have values, a variable of type number has a value of a number. What happens if you give it a string? If you say var count is equal to 5, and then in the next sentence you say count equal to quote JAY. What do you think happens? Your variable is now of type string. It converts it to a string. Yeah. If you do concatenate it, no, because you're assigning it a string. Well, we didn't do any arithmetics on it. I said if you just do var, name equal to 1, and you say name equal to j, But you're right. So what if you operate on it with an operator of another data type? What would happen? Yeah. So it would probably take the type that operator results in. Concatenation will always result in a string. I don't believe it'll do an error. We could try it. Let's create a new page. HTML5. And let's see, what are we doing? Let's put a simple script in there. and we'll say variable I is equal to 5, right? I is equal to I plus j. Right? So let's say this as j. And I can't get this thing to, let's see, if I go, how do I bring this up? I want to bring up my browser, but I don't have Chrome on here. So. There. Take that, go back to Chrome. So if I go to the console and I reload this and I just type, what do I call it, I? Yeah, so it concatenated it into a new value, and that value has, quote, I didn't get an error, has quotes around it, it's a string, right? So we want to try the opposite. Can we do the opposite? So if we go, we're creating I as equal to, let's do minus. We know plus will create a concatenation. Right. Let's try to subtract 5 from me. That'll make me 30. I used to be able to say that, but no, it'll make me 30.
Got an extra quote.
Thanks. So I save this. Oop, wrong browser. That's why I don't use Firefox anymore, because it has its own inspector in addition to Firebug, and I get confused. So we're over here and reload this. And again, to see it, I could just type. What do I get? Not a number. Right? Is that an error? It's close. it's going to result in an error probably in your program. Yeah. So so that's interesting. So if we take a number and assign it to a string, it becomes a string. If we take a string and do something crazy with it, like try to do a subtraction on it, it'll give us a number. It won't even give us the value of I anymore. Well, it's going to concatenate that. It's going to say J5. You don't believe me, huh? And if I look at, yeah. So, but by subtracting it, it's coming back and saying it's on number. So one thing you could do is test for that. You could say, you could do something like, if I think you could do that. Not 100% sure. It might be is. Let's see. Yeah, right. Yeah. So it's not equal. Let's see. JavaScript. I don't know. I don't think so. Here it is. So it's a special function. Is nan. So, and this will return either true or false, right? So I could go if is nan. Let's just put out I, see what happens. Oops, sorry. And where was our isNan is not defined. We might have to, is it part of the math function? No, it doesn't look. IsNan, did I spell it right?
Did you have capital N?
I thought so. Ah, missing the second N. Thank you. And dreamy of even solving it. Right? So then when I load this, so it found that it was not a number, and it console logged it out. Right? And it actually put it out as the original value. Pretty interesting. When I alerted it out, it said not a number. When I console logged it out, right?
Yeah, because it's going to be.
Oh no, I got to change this back. That's the problem. Yeah. All right. So it still gives me that value of man, but at least it captures it now and tells me. Right. So does everyone see what we've done? Right. We've crossed data type operations, and if we assign, so if we have a variable that we originally signed as a string, and we assign it with and we try to operate on it with a number, it will give us, it will actually change the value of that to NaN, not a number, right? If we start with a number and try to either define it as a string or create an operation that turns it into a string, there's no problem, it just becomes a string, right? So JavaScript, in fact, does give you a little bit of the features that data typing provide, especially with numbers. It gives you the ability to trap when you've tried to treat something as a number when it wasn't a number, or tried to treat something that was a number as not a number. Does that make sense? Okay. So, where are we? Too many pages. So, we talked about numbers. Numbers inherently have arithmetic operators, right? Plus, minus, right? We looked a couple of weeks ago at the JavaScript operators. Let's look at that again. This page is really useful because it lists all of them out very simply. So if you've got a number, these are the type of operations that inherently a number could work with, right? Let's see if here's the concatenation operator. Looks just like the plus operator. In fact, it is the plus operator in a different context, right? But here, that same character, that same symbol, is a concatenation, which basically, as we know, strings together. Creates a new string out of it's like a railroad car, right? You take two trains and you put them together. Maybe that's where concatenation came from, though. And if you go down this page, there's, and other pages behind it, there's other operators that you go in with. There's comparison operators. A couple of which we already looked at. The equal are the values equal? The equal is a test. It's a conditional operator that says, is this equal? Are these two equal, both in name and in or in type and in value, right? Is it, in other words, you can have a string that has a value of 5, and you can have a number that has a value of 5, and they both have the same value. If you use the equal, it would determine that, it would differentiate between those, between the types, right? Even though JavaScript doesn't have a type in the variable explicitly, it would determine whether it was a string that's being held there or not. Right? So, another concept about JavaScript when it comes to data types is that not only are numbers and strings primitives, in other words, the language knows about them without you having to define what a number is. It knows what a number is and knows you can add them. But JavaScript also offers methods, and in most cases classes, that allow you to do even more with these variables than the language has built into the operators. So, for example, there's a JavaScript string object, right? So you could let's do this. Yeah. W3 Schools is the encyclopedia of JavaScript. So in a string object, you not only get concatenation, but you also get these other methods that are available to do even more sophisticated string management and manipulation. So do you need to create something as a string object to take advantage of these methods? Or do all you need is a variable with a value of type string, is the question, right? That somebody might ask, or that I'm asking. And the reality is, even though you've just defined it as a string, you could still use these methods. You don't have to explicitly define the variable as a new instance of type capital S string. Does that make sense? So let's go through this. So let's use 2 lowercase. Let's go back to our example. We've got a variable named I with my name on it, right? And let's put a couple of upper cases in there just to be fun, right? Now, what we're going to do is say I dot, what was it, 2 uppercase? Oh, I think, I don't know whether you pass it like this or you pass it as an argument. Yeah, let's see what happens if we do this. So it didn't make it 2 lowercase, did it? So I think we might have to do. I think it. Like that? All right. So let's go back to our friends at W3C. See how they go. Come on. How do I don't know. Yeah, so you just pass it the string 2 lowercase. Let's try this again. Oh, I did upper. Yeah, I know. I think you need that.
Well, but you need to assign it from the back and on.
Oh, I equals
Yep. And do you need to do that? Let's see. Yeah. Okay. Right.
This is the function.
Right. It needs to get that return value and then use that. Because this could be something else. This could be J.
Probably put it in the console log.
Yeah, that's a better illustration, right? So, what did we learn? We created a variable. It is just a named space. We assigned it a string, so it took on the type of string, and now it takes on methods that are available to it through the string object in JavaScript, just because we've assigned it a string. Right? It's a little bit, what's the word? A little bit loosey-goosey kind of for programmers, right? because there's a definition, but there's no typing. And we're using methods on an object that we never really instantiated explicitly, right? But JavaScript does that for us within the interpreter itself. Is there ever going to be, yeah, by tonight when the quiz is, no, I'm joking. What is Jay doing? I'm just sitting here talking. Return value. Thank you, Mark. So, Cal, good question. What is Jay doing? Yeah, let's just look at it in JavaScript. So J is a new variable that has no value initially, but then we assign it the value that is returned by the string.toLowerCase function. So one of the things about this class is that if you, like I said, you don't really need a programming background, but if you haven't taken programming before, you might want to, at this point you might say, what is a function? And you have to take a little bit of a leap of faith, because I'm going to explain what a function is a little bit more this week, and we're going to go into it in depth next week. But I can't teach everything and still get things to work on the page. You know what I mean? If we had to wait, I could lecture for 4 days, 4 weeks or whatever, and then we could start working on the stuff, but that would be really boring. So stay with me. toLowerCase is a function, and functions typically, but not always, return something back. And a function is defined. It's kind of like a variable. It's defined and then it's invoked. It's not assigned, but it's invoked. It's called. A function, a variable holds a value, a function holds code. It's a collection of code, and you invoke it, you could call it. And we'll learn a lot more about that next week and throughout the class. But essentially what we're doing here, Calvin, is calling a function, and that function is essentially a method or a member of the class string. And all of those methods, which, as Paul said, all right, when am I ever going to learn all these? I mean, you saw me, I look them up. It's probably not a good use of gray matter to spend a lot of time memorizing function names. I'm not as, I'm older than you, so I don't have as much gray matter. So that's my approach. And then ultimately you learn these things, like get elements by class name. I learned that after making that mistake about 20 times. You know what I mean? But you learn these things. One of the things about being a programmer is to be resourceful. You don't have to have the biggest brain. You just have to know where to go to get the information you need when you need it. Right? So, and that's why, it's so much fun programming on the internet these days, because the documentation is right there, right? And that's why I keep going to W3C, because if I put all the stuff on my website, and next semester you're somewhere and you want to look it up and it's not, you know what I mean? So this is a good resource. I don't use a lot of resources because the internet can get overwhelming, and but W3 Schools has been very stable. We use it a lot at the school. The information is typically trustworthy and up to date, and although there's some advertising, it's easy to see through.
I just got worried because last week when I was doing the bootstrap thing, you were saying the first child, and that got four statements and attributes.
Yeah, so
I didn't know what happened.
some of that is CSS, and that's the other side. So for some of you programmers, some of those CSS tricks might not be as familiar to you. So, and we'll learn more about those when we get into jQuery, which is very CSS oriented. Do you have a question?
No, I'm just waiting for.
You want more info?
No, I mean.
You want me to go faster? You want a break? You want to watch the Giants game? All right, where are we? All right, you're allowed to bring food this class, but you got to share it. So we talked about numbers and the fact that there are intrinsically these operators We talked about strings and that there's a few operators intrinsic like concatenation, and in addition there's a string object. With numbers, there's something called a math object. Plus, minus, divide, multiply, is good, but sometimes in programming you have to use more sophisticated mathematics like linear algebra, trigonometry. If you want to create a clock with hands that go rotate, you got to do the trigonometry to say how much do I rotate for a minute or whatever, right? So I don't know how to do that stuff. I'm not smart enough to do that. But the functions are all in a class called capital M math. And there are a bunch of functions for exponents, logarithms, square roots, linear algebra, trigonometry, things like that. All right. So, and this is an exhaustive. The other thing is what type of things go into an object, right? Well, first of all, what is an object? It's an object in JavaScript is a data type that you define. Does that make sense? Yeah, and it could have, you define it with a couple of different tools. You define it essentially with 4 or 5 tools. One tool is its name. So you would create a new object and you'd name it, like you would a variable. You would also, and this is, we're jumping a little bit ahead. We're going to talk about this next week and the week after in detail. But in essence, an object is a class of something like a number or a string that you create. And it has, like I said, a name. Like number has a name, number. It also has properties. Right? Properties are attributes of it. Right? They're like adjectives in the real world, So you can have an object, you can define an object as a tiger. And you could say that the tiger has a color of yellow, and that's its property, right? As a color property, and in this case the value of the tiger's color property is yellow. That's pretty simplistic, as we know, because we would have to create a whole new object called stripes and define that, but bear with me. Question? How do you create? We'll get into that. Yeah. It also has methods. A method, where a property is like an adjective, a method is like a command or a capability. It's a verb. So a tiger would have a color, and that would be its property. It might also have a method called jump. And a tiger, inside the code for the object of tiger, you would program all that stuff that has to happen when a tiger jumps. Then when you create a new object of type kangaroo, let's say, it might also jump, but its jump method might be very different than a tiger's jump method. Right? Does that make sense? So how we create objects is probably something we should talk about in the future, or we'll get bogged down in that. But the point is, right now, we're using objects that are inherently part of JavaScript. We looked at the capital M math object. We're looking at that now, in fact. And what that has is some methods. Math.round. You can always tell a method because it has parentheses following it. Right? So we're saying go to the math object, run its round method, pass it an argument, pass it some information, and it will return that information after round has done what it will do, what its capabilities are. As we know in math, round is probably going to round up or down to the nearest whole number. Right? And the point I'm making here is, not about the math object in particular, but in objects in general. We create objects, and we get to use their properties and methods. In addition, some objects might also have something called a constant. It's like a property that doesn't change. Like pi. Math has a constant called pi, right? And it's always there. You know, it never changes. It's whatever it is, 3.14, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. So there's special types of properties in a way that are unvariable. Objects can also have events, and that's something that we probably should talk about next week or down the road. But at this point, it's important to know that JavaScript has the concept of objects. We could use the concept of objects to create data types that don't exist in the language by themselves. And the language itself sometimes uses objects to supplement its primitive behaviors, like the math and the string object. Okay? Does that make sense? And there are other objects that come built into JavaScript. Another object that's very useful for strings is the regex object, the regular expression object. And regular expressions are sort of a pseudo-pattern language, a pattern-based language for dealing with somewhat more sophisticated string operations. Finding strings within strings or filtering strings from among a collection of strings. So regex it's something we'll get into when we talk a little bit more about string objects or string types. But and some of you might be familiar with it from other languages, because regular expressions, or shorthand regex, is, while it's built in as an object to JavaScript, it's typically available in most other languages, I think, in some kind of implementation or another. So, then there's a type that we'll talk about today called a date object, right? So this is a little different. There is no inherent date object. In order to work with dates, you have to explicitly define a variable as an instance of the date object itself. Does that make sense? So this is might be more similar to people who have used object-oriented programming before, because date is an object. I'm sorry? Yeah, so let's look at what the date object has. Good question. So let's create a new page in HTML5. For some reason it keeps changing my default. And let's just create a script tag. And I haven't heard any warnings out there, but you guys are talking behind my back. It's right here. Ask more questions. You can hear you, be careful. I understand. Yeah, it's good to go back when you go through these classes and get those answers, because you should raise your hand when you ask a question, or else we don't know you're talking in the class. And Noah, if you get a question that wasn't a raised hand, just raise it when you answer it, so at least it calls the people in the room to the attention of that question. Noah, good question. All right, this goes beyond this. So a date function. So I'm going to create a variable. I'm going to name it birthday, right? And I'm going to say it's a date, right? And that's how you do it. And I could say, you might have to say it's a new date, just to instantiate it as a new object. It's not a bad idea. New is a keyword that ensures that the constructor operates on the date object. For those of you who care and know what that means. A constructor, that's a good question. In object-oriented programming, a constructor is a special method that's a member of the object that implicitly runs when you do this, when you say create a new one.
Kind of like a function.
It's a special function. So a method is a function that's a member of an object, and a constructor is a method that runs implicitly when an object is instantiated.
So it's like a default method?
It's like a default method.
What does it do?
It sets it up. It depends on what you wrote in that constructor. Right? Yeah, every object has a, so if our tiger, maybe that's not the best example, had a constructor, you would have to, create a tiger. Yeah, whatever it is that you want to abstract into that model of that object model of the tiger, you would create it. So we created a new date. Now what if we just do console.log birthday? We've got no syntax errors. Oh, that's funny. Let's work up to that. So let's go dates. I have a date. Dates 2. And if I run this, I wish I had Chrome up there so I wouldn't have to do this. Yeah, I couldn't find it. No, I could find out how to edit it in Dreamweaver. I couldn't find where the Chrome app was on the Windows desktop.
You have to do these variable types and without an application data where you can't find it, it's all hidden.
It's in Windows 8 somewhere. So I've opened my console. So I got, what do I have? Is it today's date? Here's today's date. Of everything. I have the second that JavaScript program was interpreted by the browser. So where did it get this date from? Did it go to the atomic clock in Washington? Did it? What operating system? Probably
Or it was running
where it was running. So where is it running?
on the server. No, it's on your computer.
Right. So if we were to, so here, let's do this. Does anyone know how to change the time zone in Windows? Is it easy to do?
You just click on the
On the sign down, double click.
Just right here?
Change there.
Remember that?
Yeah, change
Yeah, let me,
right below.
Oh, boy.
okay. It's going to be on tape. Okay, so we're back. Sorry about that. I can't say it's the first time I crashed Illuminate, but that was the first time I did it like purposely almost. I didn't try to crash it, but I did something that obviously changed the state of the browser. I changed the time, so I'm not going to try that again. So let's continue talking about the JavaScript date object, right? So what did we do in this last example? I worked on this a little bit since we pulled this out. So 2 lines of code, or really 1 line of code. Create a new variable, define a variable, and assign it, not a value, but assign it with a new instance of the date object. And by default, the browser will return the current time and date to the nearest millisecond. And it'll do so based on the time and date in the operating system on the local system where the browser is running, not on the server. So it's only useful, it's not useful if you want to record a time absolutely. You know what I mean? Yeah, you don't know where the person is coming from, or even if his time on his computer is correct, right? So you typically want to use the server's time as the time when you timestamp transactions and things like that, and that requires a different programming language because JavaScript doesn't really do that very well, like PHP or CGI or something like that. But if you're using JavaScript's date object, it's going to return the date on the local operating system. And that might be useful to show a user what time it is on your web page, where they are. In case they don't have a clock next to them or whatever, right? But it is the local time, and it returns the date, time, and all that. If we go back to this, wherever I was, I think it was dates 2. It returns it to the nearest actually millisecond. Right? It doesn't print out the milliseconds. It just now does it. What time is this? This is it's 8:42, which doesn't seem to make sense. Maybe I never turned.
How they took it from
I don't think so. Yeah.
maybe it's taken.
I didn't save this. Okay. Haha. Okay. So 1913, 7:13, which is the current time now, or pretty close to it, here in California. The date object. Let me go back to my page. Where am I? I don't need that. 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 Okay. So the date object, which I'll open here, can either by default return the current date and time to the nearest millisecond, or it can create a new object with whatever you pass it as the date and time value that you want to store, essentially. And a date is an object, so it has inherently properties and methods that allow you both to work with its sub-elements. You could change the minutes, you could change the seconds, you could get the minutes, things like that, right? So let's illustrate that. If we go, we have a date object, and we run this page. This was the page. It just returns the current date to the console, right? If I take that date, birthday, and I say birthday set minutes is equal to 59, right? I'm essentially passing an argument of a literal, the number 59, as an argument to the set minutes method of the date object, or in this case, of the birthday instance of the date object. And now when I run this, see if I save that file. Yep. And now when I reload this, even though we all know, when we look up on the wall there, and it's 7:15, I've added, what, 59 minutes to that. No, I haven't added. I've set the minutes to 59, so now it's 7:59. You see what I mean? I've overridden whatever the current minutes was, but I get the rest of the object. Does that make sense? Everything else is defined by the operating system. I explicitly set the minutes following the instantiation of that object. I'm sorry? Oh, all those methods, good question. So, here, let me get rid of this. Oh, get rid of this. Here, here are all the methods right here. So, from my page, there's a little link called date object, and when you open that page up, you get the documentation for the JavaScript date object in W3 schools, and it gives you all of the properties and the methods. There's only two inherent properties in this object. It has two properties that all objects have. So almost everything is implemented in the data object as a method, which is a common and, some would argue, a very clean way of doing object-oriented programming. Don't allow direct access to the properties. Always provide get and set methods to allow programmers to apply values to members of the object and get them out. Okay. And this data object is that.
Can you tell me what, or explain to me what the term instantiate is?
What does the term, the question was, what does the term instantiate? That's a word I made up. I don't think it's in the dictionary. It might be. Instantiate. To represent as or by an instance. So let's do this. We're going to talk about objects next week. But I'll answer your question in 2 minutes now, if that's okay, and then we'll go deeper next week. So in most in object-oriented programming, and let me preface this by saying JavaScript is an interesting implementation of an object-oriented programming language. It's not as pure as C++ or Java is in terms of implementing the object-oriented model of programming. So I'll say that before I get started. That's, in other words, it doesn't even know what a class is. There's no class word. However, I'm going to talk more generally about object-oriented programming now and not really the JavaScript implementation. So in object-oriented programming, a class is a definition of a type of something. Like I said before, if there's no type in the language, you can make up your own type by defining a new class, right? And a class is sort of the definition. It's sort of the DNA of something, but not the instance of it. DNA is not the right word. Let me put it this way. I could create a class, and I'm not talking about JavaScript now. I'm talking about like C++ or a real object-oriented implementation. I could create a new class called Tiger, and I could give it properties and methods. It's got properties of stripes. It does everything a Tiger does, whatever. It's not something I could use yet until I instantiate it. And I do that typically by creating a variable of type Tiger. So I would say, var Tony is equal to a new Tiger. And that's called instantiation. It's the verb, it's the process of creating a new instance from a class. And I like using it because it's a really hard word. Nobody's heard it before. Next week we're going to talk about polymorphism in object-oriented programming. But okay. Why didn't the variable overwrite the date method? It did. Why didn't the variable overwrite the date method?
It did. It overwrite the minute.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I'm not sure if that is his question. Yeah, but I didn't think of it. So what I'm going to do, I thought it just added 50. Well, that's what I asked it to do. So I didn't say create a new date with its minutes set to 59. I said create a new date, and that gave me this second, or with the second that the page loaded. And then I said set its minutes to 59. Do you see the difference, Mark? It didn't add 59. It changed the value of the minutes member or component of the date to 59. Right? That said, though, got it. Good. So that said, though, we could do something like add 59 to the minutes. And what would happen if we added 59 to minutes? It would probably crash Illuminate again, right? So let's try that. So we have a date. We don't want to crash Illuminate. So let's try this again. I'm not changing my time, so you don't have to worry about
Oh,
it.
right.
So I'm just changing the time in a variable in the browser, right? So I run this and it's 9:21, right, which it is, right? And that's just the date, right? If I take birthday dot, let's set its minutes, right? So now we're going to give it a value to define its minutes at, right? And I'm going to set its minutes as equal to birthday dot get minutes plus 65. Well, let's do this, plus 15. All right? I don't want to crash anything yet. So now, instead of saying 9:22, if this program works correctly, it should say 9:37. Am I correct?
Yeah.
And that's right. And let's assume that I saved it. So I did some time mathematics there, right? So now how smart is our date object in working with mathematics? What if I added, 65 minutes? Will it just, will it add to the hour? Who wants to say it will and who wants to say it won't?
I say it will. I will.
Okay, so you think it'll say 20?
It's going to say 20, 30.
It's going to say, so right now it's, here I'm setting the minutes equal to whatever I got the minutes plus 65 minutes.
Yeah, but it'll want to do the hours.
Oh, just try it
Is
out.
it smart enough to, even though I'm setting the minutes
I think.
and I'm making it turn over, right? I'm adding another hour. Will it be smart enough? So you don't think it's smart enough?
I do. I think.
You get 5 points if you're, no, I'm joking. Okay. So it's probably 2035, 2032 in that? Yeah. So okay. So for the price that you paid for JavaScript, it's smart enough to know how to work with time and dates, right? So let's play around a little bit more with dates. If I get set, let's see what the methods are. Get date, set date. So let's do this. Set date is equal to get date plus 65. So let's see. It's the 4th. Today's the 4th, right? So 30 days have September. So I'm going to do 3046. So, know what date this is going to be? What do you think? What do you think? What do you think the date? What do you think is going to show up here? I should do this on the quiz.
Is it years? Of course, is it years or days?
Well, what am I adding?
You're doing a whole day, right?
But what am I setting? I'm setting the date. In this case, set date sets just the date, like the 4th. So my guess is I'm going to get, you think it'll roll over to what date? To October, my birthday, October 20th. It's pretty good.
Oh, he has.
Pretty cool. So you guys could take that night off. No, I just did that. You saw me do the math. I did not count it out. Okay, so you could do something even cooler. You could go, let's do this. Let's create a new date with, I think you could pass it. See how you create a date. You don't know how to get rid of this. I think it's a console. Oh, there it is. Okay. So annoying console. So yeah. So let's do this. You have to use these in that time. You don't, but you have to do it in that order, I believe.
Can you leave it out?
So let's do this. Let's do today So this is today, right? And let's do var. Let's see if we can figure this out. So who's got a birthday coming up? Besides me. All right, you want to use mine? Day is equal to new date. I won't put the year. How's that? 2012. Ha ha. We'll have to start Illuminate again. All right. So year, month, date. Right. We won't worry about the hours. Right. And then could we do something like console log? Let's do this. How many days to my birthday? Right. So var days left. Shopping days left. Shopping days left is equal to birthday dot get. You think you could do that? Birthday minus today. Right? I don't think this will work. Let's see. It worked. So what is this? Those are the milliseconds to my birthday.
Really?
Right. So now what do we do? So we want to do, so milliseconds, so now we have seconds, right? Ah, 2 days. Okay. Yeah, that's not what we want. I don't think there's a way to convert a absolute date. You have to make your own. So you have to do the math. So if this is milliseconds, then this is seconds. So this is how many seconds left, right? And then you would divide it by 60, right? Minutes, divided by 60 hours, divided by 24, right? 60. Yeah, so this gives us seconds, this gives us minutes, this gives us hours, this gives us days. Am I right? I have no idea if this is going to work, but we'll figure it out. 76 days left to my birthday. That was the exact number I put in when I added. No, that's not right.
We put 46.
All right, so let's see. This is milliseconds, I believe. We divide that by 1,000 for seconds. You might. That's a good. I don't think so, but you might. Oh, it's counting down. My birthday's getting closer. Anybody? Let's see. This is my birthday. The real number should be what? 16. So we're off by about 60. So
16?
days to my birthday?
No,
Oh, so it's, you're right, it's 46. 46. So we're off by a month.
Try 30 in there somewhere.
Yeah, but that's...
Are you sure that wasn't milliseconds?
Let's take it up.
Is there a reason they're green and red? No, I'm business card.
Yeah, that's a good question. The fact that they're green and they're red doesn't look like it's doing what we think it is doing, I don't think. So let's do this. Let's do this. Okay, we're gonna do that, and then we're gonna divide it by 1,000, and then we're gonna divide it by 60, and then we're going to divide it by 60, and then we're going to divide it by 24. I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, right?
Yeah.
Still looks like Christmas, so.
Yeah.
So let's see if this gets us closer. We are getting closer, but not because my math is getting better, but because time is ticking on. Ah. Why would you? I don't think that. That's going to make a giant number. Oh, shopping days left of. I get it. Yeah, you're smarter than me. All right. And then we do this. And then we do. I think something like that. Actually, we don't need 1. We don't even need any of these. Does that look right?
Yeah, except for you gotta multiply the whole thing now. Multiply, the math was multiply. Now,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, right, thanks. So, not only do you have to know the syntax and what an object is and all that, you have to know, and math, you kind of have to know logic is the most important thing. And, you know, sometimes some people can get it right away, sometimes you got to play around with it. Let's see if this works. Yeah. That's it. Gates 2, is that Gates 2? Yep. Shopping days left is equal to a day in the future minus today. You're sure it's not? I think so. Hey, you want to do this? Good point. I might have messed up and put November somehow. You're right. November 20th. So, oh, why is that?
because it's 0.
Because, yeah, January is 0. Thank you. Very good. So my birthday is really 9/19 in the computer world. That's a good question. That's a good question. It's 2011. Yeah, you know, good question.
And is your birth in year then, is that also where you get 0 days?
No, I think that the year is absolute. Because 0 was a year.
That's very confusing.
0 was a year?
Yeah. I don't know, days or day or year and month is 0. Month is 0 on days.
So there's 44 days left to my birthday.
Really?
You got it.
Yeah. I think, you know,
Yeah.
according to JavaScript, that's what it is. So well, let's think about this. So the difference between them might not be the actual day. So today's the 4th. My birthday is on the 20th. It's looking at the difference. So it's probably not counting one of those. You know, when you subtract 2 from 1, you get 1, even though there's 2 days. You know what I mean? That's that thing. So that subtracts a day, and then there's a partial day. So my birthday actually starts at midnight on the 19th, and we're close to 8 o'clock on, you know, the 46th day before. So that's why we come up with 44 and change. So one less shopping day than you think. Okay, so date object. Any questions? Anyone want to try something else? Anybody have any questions about how the math works? It's smart enough to increment and do math, but it's also not smart enough to do some things like know what Thursday is. You know, you've got to figure that out. You've got to interpret it, right? So what do we mean by that? You could print out birthday dot day. Get day. Right? And what would that give us? 5. Right? So what does that mean?
5 days a week.
So my birthday this year is going to be on a Sunday is 0, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so it's on a Friday. So we probably won't have class the week after. No, I'm joking. So, right? Because if it's the 5th day. I think
No, it's on a Wednesday.
my birthday's on a Wednesday. So let's think about this.
Wait, 10/20?
10/20.
Oh, no, it's on a Saturday. You just told me.
Yeah, so there's 7 days in the week, but there's 0 through 6.
Right.
Saturday being 5, Sunday being 6. That doesn't make sense. I think my birthday's on a Friday.
No, it's not.
You're using the difference in milliseconds. Oh, yeah.
Why couldn't you just take the birthday and figure out the
No,
seconds of the day?
I'm getting the day for this date.
Why the 19th? I thought your birthday's on the 20th.
Yeah, but that's just how you write the 20th.
Oh.
Right?
Oh.
As a date. Never. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could go to a calendar and figure this out. You telling me that that the 20th is on a,
Saturday.
and JavaScript puts that. So let's go and look at that. Get day.
It's on a Saturday.
It's on a Saturday. That's what I told you.
Yeah, just so the computer wants to.
Okay. So it said, according to this, so you know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe the year.
The year is written like that, but the month is actually 0 days. The day is not 0 days.
Oh, it's not.
I just did it with my name.
Oh, cool. Okay, so I get it. Yeah, so it is weird. So there is no 0 date in any month. All months start with, which makes sense. All months start with a 1 and go through up to 31, obviously. But months go 0 through 11, and days of the week go 0 through 6, 0 being Sunday. Right? So, so what have I proved? I proved this. I want to show you something. How do I get the day of the week? Well, this just gives me a number, right? So I'm going to just create a statement that we looked at once, but we never really used, which is a switch statement. And I'm going to say switch. I'm actually going to use a variable. Day is equal to whatever get the day of my birthday, right? Oop. Okay. Now I'm going to say if day. We learned this statement a little bit, you know, in the lesson, but we never used it. And a switch statement has case clauses. So in the case of 0, you would say, Sunday. Right? I think they're separated by commas. Right? And then we can just copy this. No, because the value is going to be 0. Or the value that's coming back here is going to be 0 through 6. And I'm going to reassign it with a string.
Right, but when you do the case, you have to say in the case of zero, in the case of day is zero, then do something. In this case, all you're doing is saying.
Oh, yeah. You're right. So, yeah, so what you do, I think is, well, let's get the switch syntax. Oops.
Might have another variable.
Yeah, I think you're right. JavaScript. I can't type the W. There we go. Yep. So, and it's the condition, and then curly braces, and then cases separated with semicolons, and then a break statement. A break statement is one of these statements that changes the program flow, right? Like an if statement, or a for statement for that matter. A for statement changes the program flow to make it circular. If statement makes it branch. Switch statement is kind of like, if you use breaks in every case, it's sort of like, you know, Penn Station in New York, you know. Instead of an if-then, it's like if, you know. It gives you a bunch of different tracks to follow it, you know. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to create 7 tracks. If it's
right down
0.
there at the bottom of that page is the example.
Okay, I don't even have to write it. Look at that. Perfect example. Thank you. Just made my day. And instead of going, I don't need that. I've got my day, and now I'm going to print X. Right?
Okay, you don't have a variable declared. X is not declared.
Yeah, it's not the best, but JavaScript is just that way. I think this should work. So the code came with today's, but we want to say Jay's birthday is, right? And we could repeat that. On all of them, we know it's going to come up as, what is my birthday? Friday? Saturday. Pretty cool. Right? So we subtracted dates to come up with a number. Now we came up with a new date, given one date and a call to ask for what is now. How do we ask for now? Create a new date by default without passing in anything. And then we could do mathematics on those dates. It's a little tricky. You know, we do them. We have to look at, you know, milliseconds, if you think about it, because dates are stored in as a millisecond. Milliseconds from whatever, Christ's birth, essentially, right?
I think it's 1973.
Yeah, I think you're right. In fact, there is, yeah. If you get a, well, we have that date object there. Might say it in here. Yeah, I think it starts from when Bill Gates was born or something. January 1st, 1970. So when Flower Power died, the date function started working. You have a question?
No, I'm saying, can you go back to the code while you talk?
Can I go back? I could.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So a new variable with a date. This is going to take the millisecond that this line was interpreted by the browser. Right? Then I'm going to create a new date, but this time I'm going to assign it specific values. This is a year. This is a month with a 0 to 11 off, you know, universe essentially, and this is a date on a 1 through 31. And now I could do some math. I could subtract those, and I get a number. And that number is the milliseconds between the second that the page loads and the second that I turn 35. And when I take that number and I divide it by everything that it takes to turn a millisecond into a date, I get the number of days to my birthday. Does that make sense? Then we did that. That's shopping days. We're not using that in our console log. What we've been doing is saying, get that, the value that's in here, and run the getDay method on it. In other words, find out what in a 0 to 6 day of the week universe that day falls on, that specific day this year. And then put that in a, and then basically implicitly put that in a variable called x, based on this, the results of this switch statement, and log that out to the screen. Right? So what's new here is the date object. What's new here is a couple of things. What's new here for you guys is everything. One, an object that comes with JavaScript that you don't have to create and you don't have to buy. Date is just there. And it gives you a whole bunch of cool things that you can do in programming, right? Number one. Number two, the concept of that there are objects that come with JavaScript, like date and math and string, that extend the capabilities beyond just the primitive stuff. Three, that you can actually do math on this object because essentially a date can evaluate to a specific number. You know what I mean? You couldn't do math on like 10/20/2012. You know what I mean? That is a string. That's a string that we humans understand, but that JavaScript doesn't. Right? But we could instantiate a date of a specific value by using the right notation for the object, and then we could do math on it.
Can you divide it per day minus day?
Yeah, this little snippet here is essentially what turns milliseconds into days. Right? If you want to turn it into years, what would we do? We divide this whole thing by 365, right? Or multiply by, no, that don't. Oh yeah, because we're dividing by a multiplication, right? So in here we put 365, right? And let's say, how many years, what are we going to do here? Shopping days left. So how many shopping years left we're really doing, right? Because we're multiplying by 365 until my birthday in 2020, right? And that number should be 8 or something, 7 and change, right? So if I load this up, 8 and change. So I got more time than I think. Does that make sense? So this string, this evaluates it to seconds, minutes, hours, days, years. And all you have to do is back through the conversion numbers. Okay? Now, did I make this up? Did I look this up in W3 Schools? Did my logic work right the first time? No. But it didn't. It took us 2 minutes to say, how do you turn a millisecond into a year? Right? It's all things we know. We just have to kind of put them on paper. This is how you do it. Any questions? I haven't even started on what we wanted to get into today, so but there's a question.
I just accidentally erased the shopping days back output of that. I just said shopping days left equals 30 minus 3. It still works.
To the year? No. Oh, it'll still work,
days.
but it'll give you milliseconds.
No, unless I'm misunderstanding.
Oh, maybe you're doing you're subtracting the dates, which is fine unless you go across months. I don't think it'll be able to do it across months. You know what I mean?
What about days?
Huh.
All
All right, so let me see your code here.
Oh, I made it for you. I'm lying.
All right. I don't think it's going to be able to do subtraction of dates across months if you're using the actual date number. So, any questions about any of this? You guys want to, let's start working on project 2. It's not due until, well, let's figure out how many days it's due. It's not due until at least 2 weeks from when it's assigned. And it's not assigned quite yet. It is assigned in the fact that it's up there, but I don't expect you to work on this until Thursday when you're done with project 1. And you're done with the quiz, which is, you know, so.
No, on Friday.
Friday, that's fine. Okay, so project 2. Well, you still got a couple of seconds to get going. So where's our page? Did we cover everything in here? This is essentially, this is kind of cool. You're right, very good. So there's a better way. Let's do this. Instead of this switch statement, there's other ways that we can create kind of that lookup functionality. You know, the switch statement was kind of easy because somebody else wrote it and we copied it, right? But there's another way we could do this. We could create an object. In JavaScript, objects are kind of cool in the sense that you could create even a complex object as a literal. So what I mean by that is we could create a new variable. We could call it days of week. And we could assign it with a set of members, name value pairs. And to some people this might look like an array, which is a set of members with an indexing, right, 0 through X, right? And some languages allow what's called associative arrays, where you can actually name the index, like PHP, for example. In JavaScript, while there is an object called an array, and we'll learn about that in a couple of weeks, you also can just literally just create name value pairs, and that becomes an object. And you could say Sunday. And you can separate them with a comma. And this is called JavaScript object notation, or JSON. And if we copy that a bunch of times and change the values, I could show you how to simply look these things up. Friday and Saturday, right? So we have a variable called days of week, right?
You can change your numbers in there too.
Thanks. 2, 3. So this is sort of a literal. It's a specific definition. 1, 2. You guys lose 5 points if you do something like this.
He didn't thank me. I swear to him.
Thank you. That's all right. I thank everybody for helping me with this. Okay, so we have a date called birthday. We have a variable, which is a type date called birthday, and it has a specific October 20th. And then we have a variable called days a week. We could go, we have the day in the number, right? So we could say, let's do this, console log days of week, and give it the index of the day, right? The value of this is going to be some value of 0 through 6 for the day of the week. And it's going to take that value and look it up in this object and take the corresponding value that corresponds to that value and put that out. So let's see if this works. Theoretically, so it says my birthday is on a Tuesday. So are we still talking about the same day?
Well, you look at it in 2020.
Yeah. All right, well, that's something to look forward to. Let's save that. And we know that it's a Saturday, and my birthday is on a Saturday. Right?
So when you tied those together, was just putting the days of the week day with the function.
Yeah, so first time I did it was with a switch statement, and everyone understood that. the program logic decides, right? Here, I'm creating a new variable called day, right? I'm defining a variable. Oh, I'm sorry. Called days of week. I'm defining it as a variable, but instead of giving it a unary value, a name and a value, this is a special variable. The variable itself has multiple values.
So it's an array.
It's an array. It's very similar to an array. In fact, in this case, it is 100% identical to an array because the index is essentially 0 through 6. Right?
You tie day in with the numeric value below where you get console.log.
Right there. So this, yeah. So here, watch this. If I do let's do this. Console. Can't type. Log. Day, and that should give me 6, right? Let's even do this. Console.log days of week. Just so you can see what that thing looks like, if we can see it. So I console log out the variable, the value of the variable days of week, and it gives me this thing. I console out day, and I get the return of the function, what is the day of the week on my birthday this year, right? With that as passed. And then this gives me the value back of what it is in that object. If I look at the object, everyone's dying to look at it. If I open this up, it actually gives me the content, the members listed and the values listed of that object, right? But it's, I'm not trying to confuse you by giving you too many concepts at once. This is an object and an array kind of thing. I'm just trying to show you in the practical world, you could use a switch statement, or sometimes you could use a little faster and quicker way of doing it. If you do this 6 times in a program, you don't want to have 6 switch statements. Whereas you could define this object once and use it again and again. Now you could define that switch statement on a function and call it that way, but this is a cleaner way of doing it in many ways.
By using the square bracket,
That's how you pass it the index, right? If I pass it here, instead of saying get me the day of the week, days of week, for whatever is passed in here, right? Based on what the birthday is. But if I just give it like a 5, what's going to happen? It's going to, all the other values will be the same, but it's going to put, because it's just going to evaluate that with the hard-coded 5. Does that make sense? But I'm letting the program define what the index is and letting it look that up in the object and return back the value that I want. Right? Okay, so project 2. Let's see where we are. Okay, so project 2. Project 2 is pretty straightforward. It's kind of a cool project. It's a timer. It's a timer so you can take a nap at work, essentially, right? So it allows you to take a nap up to 60 seconds, and you put the time in. And so let's say I want to take a nap for 45 seconds. That's probably too long, I'll fall asleep. Let's say 10 seconds. Let's say 5. And I could start my nap, and what it'll do is play the sleepy music. It's not playing. Is that thing on? Huh. You guys hear it?
No.
I don't hear it. All right. Let's try. Well, why did it do it? Let's try. There's a bug in my program already. All right. Yeah, I don't know why the music's not playing. Let's. Speakers are on.
Yeah, no, we can hear them when they're with the hands.
All right, let's try this in Firefox.
audio, the audio tag. This is the audio tag. Very small file.
Hear anything? Hey, my program doesn't work. So, I hear it.
In your mind.
In my mind. All right.
What's it supposed to play?
It's supposed to play the sleepy time music. I know it's not. Well, it should play. Let's see. Maybe I got bugged. Oop, I'm in Firebug. Ah. Audio element is our audio element is sleep music. And, where is my audio? Audio tag 1. See if that, right? Okay. So, my page doesn't work because somehow the code changed. I have to fix my page, but the project still works. Does that make sense? It's the code on my page that doesn't work. Let's go back to Chrome. I just mixed up my variable names. Somehow, yeah, and there were a few people. Anyway, I'll fix that. But the code should still work unless I don't think we've changed the names on the code. So let's walk through the code to see what it does, and then let's see, time permitting, how far we get in building this page, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But the purpose of this page is to functionally, it's not really rocket science. It's like an egg timer. You put the number of seconds in, and it starts, and it counts down, and then it wakes you up when it's done. And while you're taking a nap, it plays this soothing music that lets you nap. So, and you can always pause and resume it in case your boss walks into your office while you're taking a nap. So it's a very simple thing. Unfortunately, the actual application on the page, like I said, doesn't work. But let's walk through the code. So we just create an HTML5 page. We create some basic elements on the page, right? We have a paragraph that says wake up, and it has an ID. I just happen to call that ID wake up. And that's obviously a very simple thing. We're going to hide it from the page. We're going to do display none is how we hide something, at least using CSS. And then we're going to have the JavaScript to display that element, set display equal to block when the timer runs out. And it's going to be a big thing that says wake up, right? So that's that functionality. Then there's a form, and that form essentially has one input element, which was that text field you saw, the default of which is 60, right, 60 seconds. And then there's two buttons, start your nap, and then like a toggle, pause and replay. We're going to hide this button until we start the playing, because we don't want to have pause until play is started. So this button does nothing but start the music. So it has an ID called start. And that's how we'll access that button to put an event listener on it to say when that button is clicked, go out and do something.
So this little counting down time thing, is it like a loop? So when it goes to...
Let's go take a look.
It goes
Yeah, let's take a look. So it is kind of a loop. So what we're doing, so I create a data element, and that data element, as we know, since I didn't give it an argument, is what? It's the millisecond that the page loads that line of code, right? Current, it's now, let's say, you know, for lack of a better word, it's now. And then I say, what is in that field? I call it seconds. It's 60 by default, you know. And then I decrement right here. So you click the button, and this take nap function runs. And what does it do? It sets a variable, this date that I created, which is now. It sets its seconds to whatever is in that field. So if you ran this program and it was 1:28 and 12 seconds, and it said 60 seconds in that field, it would put 60. It would be today's date, hour, month, and 60. You know what I mean? Because all we're using is the second part of the date field as a countdown mechanism. In fact, as I say here, you really don't even need a date object. You could use an integer, because we're just using the seconds of the date object, which is essentially an integer that can go up to 60, right? And then we take that, whatever's in the field, set that to the seconds, and then we start something in JavaScript called a timer. This is a special method that comes with the window object of the DOM of JavaScript. The window object is capabilities that are part of the browser. Not your page, but the browser. So if you say window back, it's like clicking the back button, right? If you say window set interval, that's setting a timer in the browser. And when you say set an interval with the second argument being 1,000, that timer is going to fire every second, every 1,000 milliseconds. And every time it fires, it's going to do alarm. It's going to run a function. It's going to run the code that's in its first argument. And that code that we have in here is a function name, which is defined down here. So we define a function and then we invoke it. Here we're invoking it every second. Every second we go to alarm and we say, take that seconds and reduce it by a second. Right, so we get the countdown. And then we do a test. If there's 0 seconds left, wake up. Change wake up's display to block. So that block wake up shows, and hide the other stuff. You know, the stuff that has the ability to put the seconds down, you know, the countdown and the buttons. Yeah, because the code on my page is buggy. I gotta fix my page. But this code should work if you write this code yourself. I just changed a variable somewhere along the line, I believe. So does this make sense? It's a timer, right? So one of the things I wanted to try to get to today was events. We'll talk about them next week. But there's a lesson on events right here. Doesn't have a little book next to it yet. I've got to put that in there. And it started, I'm going to fill this out a little bit, but this will go through sort of the theory of what is a JavaScript event. But one of the types of events that we have are called timer events. And set interval is a timer event. Most JavaScript events are what's called browser interaction events. Click or scroll or focus, you know, focus. You're within a form focus to a text field, or what's the opposite of focus? What's the opposite of focus? Blur. Blur is an actual method in JavaScript. It's the opposite of focus. When you leave a text field, you tab out of it, the blur event for that element fires. And if you define the blur event handler, that will work. You could say text field dot blur is equal to make it red. You know, text field dot style dot background color equals FF0000, right? And that will make the background color that red when you leave it. You probably don't want to do that unless what they left in there is wrong. You know what I mean? But that's what the blur event does. So JavaScript comes with a whole bunch of browser events, or let me put it this way. Your browser comes with a whole bunch of user events, and if you are using a good browser, a compliant browser, it uses the events that the other browsers use, which are the DOM-defined events. And to get those events, to find a list of them, you could do JavaScript event handlers. And I bet you, I think it's, yeah, that's right. Do you see it?
No, it's in the toolbar, usually at the bottom on all of their pages. Their references are at the bottom left. I don't see it there.
Yeah, there is a list. JavaScript, let's go back here. Come on. Here we go. Okay, so here's a somewhat good list of the events available within the browser. Click. We've used this already, right? We used it, I think, in the first project. Right? It's a very common one, obviously. Double click. Mouse over. Mouse over is like hover, right? In CSS pseudo element talk, right? What's the difference between key down and click? Yep. Very good. Here's blur. Occurs when a form element loses focus.
So does it have to have focus to lose focus?
Yep. Yeah, or else, yeah.
So if it never has focus, and you use the blur,
it won't fire. Right. Right. So let me explain something about events before we even talk about what the specifics are. In JavaScript, there are two, in programming in general, in event-driven programming, there are two steps, kind of like any function, but they're a little different. An event is like potential energy, right? It's instructions that you only want to run in the case something happens, like a spring, you know? It's there waiting for somebody to click, and then it fires. So it takes two steps for an event to happen. You need to have an event listener. You need to have the code somewhere in your program that says, watch for this event. And then you need the event handler. What are the functions? What is the code you want to run should that event run? In JavaScript, they often mix them up. JavaScript tends to call event handlers events. But they really are, you know, so blur is an event listener that's built into the DOM. You could say text field blur equal, and that gives you the ability to add code to that event. But like I just said, it really is an event listener. Blur is the thing that you're waiting to happen on. And what you assign it to, the code you assign it to, is the event handler. It's what happens in the event that that event happens. Right? Does that make sense? So there's a couple of exceptions to that. One is JavaScript also comes with or browsers come with some built-in events that really don't need an event. It's kind of like shortcut. And setInterval is a good example of one. So where are we? How do I get rid of this? Let's go. So if we go back over here and we look at project 2, you could see, let's see what events we've set. So, like here's a different way of setting an event. we've set click events by saying element.click is equal to, and then this code. Do you remember that? Here we're doing a slightly different way. We're explicitly saying add an event. We're using the add event listener method, which is available to all DOM elements that could be clicked on to listen for that click. And we're saying the event handler is this new function that I'm creating called pause play. And I define it right here. And when that button is clicked, that on-off button is clicked, it'll run this program. If the music is playing, pause it. If the music is paused, play it. It kind of creates a toggle, right? So that's an example of an event listener and an event handler, right? This is another simplified way of using events in JavaScript. In essence, a timer is like an event. You know, alarm is an event handler. It's potential energy waiting for something. What event is it waiting for? But what trigger? What?
Change.
It's waiting for the next second. It's waiting for set interval is waiting 1,000 milliseconds, and then it runs. It fires. Then it automatically, because it's set interval, it doesn't stop until you tell it to stop. So it's like a metronome, you know. It keeps the beat. It's like a drummer, you know. Just by putting this one code in here, I say every second run alarm, right? And every time it runs, it changes a few things and updates it. So I don't think we'll have time to go and start creating this page. We'll do that next week. But if you're interested in getting started in Project 2, it's good to walk through the code and just see what all these things do. I did try to explain them in here as best I could, but you know, as you know, I get paid to say this stuff again, so I'm doing it. The best way is to figure out, why your code doesn't work. The other main component of this project is audio, which you couldn't hear because of the problem in my code right now, but should work on most browsers, and I think should work, definitely on Chrome and Firefox, both on Windows and on Mac. I haven't tried it on Windows, but I don't think that's the problem I'm having, so I'll take a look at that. So audio is something that you need Flash for, right? So do you guys all have a copy of Flash from the book? No, I'm joking. Yeah. Up until HTML5, you needed Flash to play audio on a web page.
Oh, okay.
But we're using HTML5 now, so I was just pulling you away. What we simply have to do is create an element called audio. And we can then use the JavaScript audio API to manage that audio element, to play it, to pause it, to stop it. And I show you some of those techniques right in here. And I also show you where you can find out more information about the audio element and its various events, like pause, play, stop, all of that stuff, right? So, and then it all comes together. So the music doesn't start playing until the timer starts, and then the timer stops the music from playing. So in this project, you're going to learn a couple of things. You're going to learn how to program it. You might already know the audio element, HTML5. Now you're going to program it with JavaScript. In the past, you might have just explicitly put it on there and said autoplay or something, right? Or click to play or whatever. So you'll learn how to do that in JavaScript. You'll also learn how to even replay it, so to create a loop. Because I took a short sample and wanted it to play at least 60 seconds. So you'll see that in my code. The other thing you'll learn is a little bit more about events, because we have a couple of different types of events in that program. And the third, maybe the most important thing you'll learn is sometimes programs have to be thought of architecturally. Here we have two things going on. We have a timer and we have an audio playing. And they work together. And part of the programming is figuring out how do you tie them together. And as you see in the instructions, You create all the timer piece, you create the audio piece, and then these last couple of codes takes the timer piece and hooks it into the audio piece. You know, you play the music when you start the timer, and you stop the music when the alarm stops the timer. Simple, it's not rocket science, but it'll show you some simple techniques for how to program two different things. It's like juggling, you know? You got music playing, you got a timer going, but you want them to work in concert. How do you tie them together? And we do that with functions. So it's a simple introduction to the concept of defining and calling or invoking functions. It's a little bit of a simple introduction into events. It's an introduction into the JavaScript API to the audio file, and it's kind of a fun project, and you could use it to sleep at work. So I've talked for about 3 hours. Any questions before you leave? Anything going on?
Hey, it's not 3 hours. Keep talking.
Yeah, but you get 10 minutes to move on to your next class. You know that. Do not forget the quiz. If you show up next week and you haven't taken the quiz, you get booted out because we're going to go through the quiz first. So, so it opens in like 3.5 hours. Opens at midnight tonight, and there is no time on it. There is no time on it. All you do is you go to the home page, and you click there, and it doesn't say now, but it's going to open it on the 5th.
So, like, do you have to log on or anything?
You do have to log on. You have to log into Kate to take the test.
So we can print these out and take the quiz and print it out and then
You can go here and print it out, and then go back in next week.
So it's not valid until you send it.
It's not valid until you submit it. That's correct. You want to take a look at it? Okay. Any questions? Any questions at home that I missed or that Noah hasn't gotten to you?
It's an open book, open note. It's not.
That's true, you can
Okay, I am going. Are you guys done? No questions? Want to get out of here? I am going to pause the recording. Thank you, everybody at home. Noah, you've been great tonight. You've helped out a lot of people that I didn't even know had questions. They don't raise their hands, or maybe I couldn't hear them.
Yeah.
Because our speaker.
Oh no, I think it was working earlier.
Yeah, but I think when we got back on. I hope I was recording this second.
Yeah.
Well.
Yeah. All right. So, all right. Well, I'm going to cancel this session. I'll see you guys next week.
Oh, yes.
Have fun on the project.
Oh, yes.